It was my mom's 60th birthday recently, and my sister Julie had the idea that we could make her a collage in a picture frame shaped like the number 60. We're both trained artists, so we quickly drew some incredible sketches of our concept for the frames. I knew right away that I wanted to do some kind of like segmented ring where the grain follows the form of the numbers. So I picked a font that looked conducive to being made out of wood, and I made a drawing in Fusion 360. My first attempt at this was a complete failure. I'm really not that great at geometry, surprisingly. But once I had convinced myself that I had a good plan for cutting the segments, I fired up Matthias Wandel's Big Print and made a scale drawing. I glued it down to some 1/4-inch MDF with some spray adhesive and cut out the patterns on my bandsaw and scroll saw. Scroll saw is a great tool for cutting out holes on the inside like this. It's a lot easier to sand this 1/4-inch MDF than it will be to sand the thicker oak that I'm going to make the blanks out of. So I'm making sure to get the edges nice and smooth here with the spindle sander and the disc sander. So both my number designs are based around circles with 8 segments. And that means that each of these pieces need to have a 45-degree angle if you add both sides together. So 22.5 would be the angle I need to cut here. And it has to be really precise because you're gluing up 8 pieces, so any little bit of error is going to be multiplied 8 times. And even if you're off by just a fraction of a degree, 8 times that fraction might end up being a pretty significant gap. Most of the people that I've seen doing segmented rings online have used a thing called the Wedgie sled. I wanted to do basically the most simple thing I could to get this project done. And I just happened to find a video by Jer Schmidt where he creates a sort of modified wedgie sled, and he basically just uses the wedge itself as the fences. That seemed pretty simple, so I got to work on the sled. So the idea here is that the wedge is sort of like the same angles that you want your segments to be. And since I want my, both angles together adding up to 45, I basically just need a big 45-degree wedge. And it's pretty easy to cut 45 degrees on my MFT table. So I just stuck it on the table and cut myself a wedge. I sort of eyeballed where the holes should go and drilled them out in the wedge, and then moved on to creating the base. I started with a piece of MDF, cut it to size, and drilled some holes in the same spot. And then I routed out a little pocket for the head of the T-bolts on the bottom. The wedge then slides in place and gets held on with some threaded knobs, and I could get to work on making a miter bar. When I first started with woodworking, creating an accurate miter bar was something that was really difficult. I'd watch videos of people making them on the table saw, and I could just never get that to work for me. I don't know if my table saw is not accurate enough or if I'm not good enough at just bumping the fence, but I really like making my miter bars on the planer. It's really easy to shave off like 1/1000th of an inch with the planer, so you can really sneak up on a perfect fit for your table. And I made my miter bar out of hard maple. My shop has got a dehumidifier in it, so I don't really have to worry too much about expansion and contraction. I haven't really had a problem with any of my other miter bars. So once I got my perfect fit, I can label the side that will go up and bring it to the bandsaw. Of course, over here, I had a different idea about what up should mean, and I ended up cutting in the wrong orientation. So off camera, I made another miter bar, and then put it in my miter slot, raised up by a couple of nuts, glued it in place, and then drilled some holes with countersinks and screwed the bar in place. I don't really like how these pieces can just fall away and potentially get kicked back. A lot of people create a ramp attached to their saw insert so that the pieces fall away from the blade, but I figured it would be better if I had it set up more like a crosscut sled where the pieces get supported all the way through the cut. And I ended up liking this. So now that I have my sled complete, I found a piece of red oak I've had sitting around for a while, and this piece is a little twisted. If I took it right to the joiner, first off, I don't think it would fit. It's a little bit wider than my joiner, but even if my joiner was big enough, the twist is enough that to get it flat, I'd have to take off a good 1/4 inch. So I decided to rip it into strips first on the table saw to about 2 inches, and I could take those 2-inch strips to the joiner, and I only had to take off a little tiny bit to get those nice and flat. Then I sent them through my planer to get them to a consistent thickness and width. This is seriously such an amazing tool. When I first started woodworking, I made a laminated bench top out of 2x4s, as one does, and I was watching a lot of Paul Sellers videos, and he really makes using those hand planes look quite a lot easier than it is. I think I spent 2 months laminating that top together. So now I can finally cut out my actual segments. We can see kind of how the sled works now. You cut the first side on the close end, and once you have that, you move the whole piece to the other end of the wedge, and you can cut the other side. And with this arrangement, you don't actually need to have the wedge like exactly perpendicular to the blade, because really the precision is all in the wedge itself. So after I cut all of the first 8 pieces here, I clamped them up to see how I did, and it's really not that bad. I can cut away the section with the gap later on when I actually make the numbers. So I cut out the rest of the segments, and I laid them all out on my patterns to get an idea how they were going to go together. I started out by gluing up the ring that was going to make the 6. Later on for the 0, I can glue it up in the same way, except I didn't add glue on these 2 parts so that I end up with 2 halves. And I'll just add some kind of straight pieces in between the 2 halves later to make that big oval for the 0. To make that first ring into a 6, I need to glue on a piece that sticks up tangentially. It was really convenient that the gap was towards the outside of the ring, so I can really just cut the gap off and glue this tangential piece, where those gaps used to be. Similarly, with the ring halves for the 0, I just took off a 32nd from each of the rings, which gave me a nice 90-degree and straight interface for the longer pieces, and I cut those on my radial arm saw and glued them up just like I glued up the original ring. I used the old super glue and blue tape method to attach my patterns to the blanks. Took it over to the bandsaw and later the scroll saw to trim off the excess pretty close to the template. That way the router bit doesn't need to take off, huge chunks, it'll just be a little bit. After routing, the templates popped off very easily, and I got all the sides nice and flat with some sandpaper on a piece of melamine. I used a rabbiting bit on my router table to cut the rabbets. I couldn't get all the way into the corner of the 6 here with the spindle sander, so I used a chisel with a very flat back to pare away the excess. So at this point it was about, I think, 26 hours before the party was going to start. So I actually ran to Michael's and asked the lady at the picture counter if I could buy just a piece of their UV resistant acrylic and she actually was really nice. She cut it for me, and you know, it was a little more expensive than I would typically pay online for something similar. But hey, I had to get this done quick. The acrylic cut pretty easily with the tracksaw and the bandsaw. Off camera, I sprayed the fronts of the frames with some rattle can lacquer. I think they look pretty good. Then I used a knife to cut the mats into the same shape as the acrylic, and then I used a pointing gun to fix it all in place. I quickly screwed on some of the hardware for hanging, and pretty much immediately hopped in the car to go to the party. Julie had the collages all ready, and all we had to do at the party was cut them to size and give the frames to our mom. There's some pictures from family vacations, my mom's brothers and sisters, and then me and Julie playing in the leaves with our mom back when we were still cute kids. I'll definitely be playing around more with segmented rings in the future. I want to find out what the limits of the precision on this MFT table really is, and maybe how I can improve my setup for cutting those wedges so that I get a little bit higher accuracy. Anyway, thanks a lot for watching the video. Hope you enjoyed it, and I'll see you next time.